Well, good morning. It's the appointed time for the meeting of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board. We will call the meeting to order. Item 2 on our agenda is the consideration of the minutes of the June 27th meeting. Are there corrections or additions to those minutes? And Gloria, what's your question?
My question is that do we have more than one motion on that? The one I see is that it was not recommended. I thought we took two different votes.
Item 7, maybe.
Okay. Are there other additions or corrections?
I move approval.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The minutes are approved. Item 3 on our agenda for today is the MAPS 3 Revenue and Expenditure Report. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your packet the MAPS 3 Revenue and Expenditure Report for the period ending May 31st, 2013. On the revenue side, you can see that for the month, we have a revenue of $8,386,543, fiscal year of $95,893,955, for a total program of $300,059,424. On the expenditure side, you can see on the month we have $1,046,696, for the fiscal year $14,043,672, and for a total program of $26,911,012. Draw your attention to the subnote A that the interest is not posted for this month because of a posting issue, and that will be shown in June. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Michael Adams is our reigning CFO. Any questions or comments?
I do not have any questions or comments. I would move approval.
Been moved that we receive the report. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The expenditure report is received. Item 4 on the agenda is a presentation about the MAPS 3 Park project. David, you want to introduce that for us?
Yes, sir. Item 4 is presentation of MAPS 3 Downtown Public Park Master Plan Development Project M3-P006. As you know, the Parks Subcommittee has been working very hard with the consultant, and what we have today is the draft of the master plan for that park. And we have Mary Margaret Jones from Hargraves & Associates. We'd like to invite her up to do a presentation on this.
Mary Margaret, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. I think this is a somewhat momentous day as we conclude this year's worth of study we've been doing and public process and stakeholder input, all of which has been extensive and very helpful. And we're very pleased to present this draft of the master plan for your consideration. It's a 300-something page document. Hope you all get a chance to read it. But this will be a short PowerPoint summary of that document, covering all the issues, but for more depth, feel free to go to that report, which the Planning Subcommittee is definitely, the Park Subcommittee is definitely studying closely. So the agenda of this presentation, I'll do an overview of the master plan, which hasn't really changed since the last time you saw it. What we've done since then is back it up with some of the technical issues you see listed under that: operations and maintenance, management structure, revenue sources, etc. So that's what we'll focus on today. I noticed earlier maybe these two lights could go off. Earlier there were some lights off and some on. Does that work? Or can you guys see it okay? I guess you have it at your, okay. All right, you're fine. Just to summarize briefly, the park, of course, extends from the boulevard and the future site of the convention center all the way to the river. So its character follows that path, that progression, with a 100% corner, a plaza, an interactive fountain, the Big O oval lawn for performances and events, cafe, gardens, a very active, vibrant edge. Then it proceeds south through children's play areas, woodlands, a lake with paddle boats and a bridge, continues with gardens down Robinson, connects with a promenade to Skydance Bridge, over the freeway, and that promenade continues down to the river, and the lower park takes on a more natural characteristic appropriate for the connection to the river with wetlands and shady gardens. So this blow-up of the upper park, so we always refer to upper park and lower park, this plan enlargement of the upper park enumerates those different elements that the upper park comprises. One of the benefits, and then the lower park, which you can see is more about green space and recreation, community connections, and connection to the river. One of the great assets we have in a park this large that makes it distinct from, say, Myriad Gardens are those activities one can only do in a park of this size. So it's the lungs of the city. You can have big performances, big events, a lake, and much more landscape expression. So these images start at the 100% corner, what we call the 100% corner of the Boulevard and Robinson, with the interactive fountain that, when turned off, becomes a plaza for the spill out of events from Chesapeake Arena, and you see behind it the oval lawn and the hill, the promontory at the back of the oval lawn, and to the right the cafe, and to the left the stage structure. From the other corner, from the Boulevard and Hudson, right? Sorry, had a brain gap there for a minute. You enter into a woodland shady environment, a very different kind of introduction to the park from that corner. And then once you're up on the promontory, that amazing view of the skyline, the arena, and across that great lawn that can be used by 2 people or 2,000 people or 10,000 people. Standing on that promontory and turning the other direction, you get a sense of the different kinds of characters we're able to provide in a large park. And you see across the lake, and you see the Skydance Bridge in the background, and Union Station in the background as well. So a more pastoral, serene kind of environment. And tying it all together, the really important promenade that makes the connection from downtown to the river with lighting, seating, special paving, lots of activity. And then progressing south to the river in a more natural landscape with wetland, ponds, etc. There is phasing. Just to remind everyone, there are some slight variations in what you see here from what was previously approved. No in numbers change, but we did slightly adjust the numbers between phase 1, 2, and 3 to respond to the actual plans. That will need to be approved by City Council. And there are some date changes that respond to conditions really outside of our control of surrounding projects, et cetera. So that will all need to be approved by City Council. But you see that we're still proposing, of course, the whole master plan. And then phase 1 would build the performance lawn. It would build the event space that right now there's a strong market for. Chesapeake Arena will use that right away. So you get that 100% corner, the great lawn, the event space, performance space, the stage, restrooms, shade structure, a plaza for food trucks. I was in Myriad Gardens last night, and there was a farmer's market going on and a performance going on and food trucks, and it was very lively. And you can imagine that kind of thing on a bigger scale here right away. And then the connection to Skydance Bridge, a really good connection to Skydance Bridge, rather than what we have now, which is a find your way connection. So that would be phase 1. And then phase 2 would be the upper park, and phase 3 would be the lower park. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that's the design. Let's talk about maintenance and operations. Let's always remind ourselves that maintenance and operations isn't just cutting grass. It's all these things. All of these things are important to making a successful park, including programming. And these are the kinds of numbers that are appropriate for a park of this size and nature for maintenance and operations on a yearly basis, going from $1 million to $3.3 million a year when complete. That puts us mid-range of comparables across the country and here in the city, and that's about right. So you see it's not nearly as high a maintenance cost as Myriad, because Myriad is much more compact, with programming all densely compact, but it's more than the average park here in Oklahoma City today, which is appropriate for the amount of program we will have. So about midway. That operations and maintenance budget is comprised of a number of pieces of the pie, and here you see those proportionate to one another. So it goes from contracted services to administration, programming, security, and a conservancy staff, and I'll talk about the conservancy next, with a management structure proposal that we are making, where we are suggesting there are many models for park managements and government systems. We are recommending a public-private partnership, so you get the best of what each of those do. Public agencies do some things best, and private foundations do some things best, like fundraising. So we're recommending that partnership. This kind of structure is the structure you would see in place by the completion of the park, not day one. This would be by the completion of Phase 3. You would build this incrementally with each of the phases. And there's part-time staff, contracted staff, full-time conservancy staff, and of course the governance of a conservancy board, which we are recommending be begun now, and be begun to be formed now, and of course City of Oklahoma City and the Parks Department. So how do we fund O&M? We know we have capital costs covered with the bond, with the MAPS vote. What a great asset. So many cities are struggling to figure out how to build their parks. You are at an advantage that you were just trying to think about how to fund the operations and maintenance of a park. So remember that as we now talk about the numbers. Obviously, the sources of funding change over time. We need more government funding up front as the other sources of funding are built, like philanthropy and sponsorship, earned income from the elements in the park itself, and, for instance, a business improvement district, which we believe should be formed for the quarter mile surrounding the park, and as it is developed, it will then feed money back into the park. We are starting right off with what we know will be the biggest revenue generator in the park, and those are large events. We think that we can initially have at least 2 a year and ultimately have at least 5 a year. And the funding for those big events comes from these different sources: rental, admissions, food, beverage, merchandise, sponsorship. And you see that this could lead to 100 to up to eventually almost $500,000 a year toward those maintenance costs. And then smaller kinds of events, more local kinds of events, can also generate income to another, say, 50 to 120 as we grow, for things like Thunder Alley, Conference of Mayors, which was held here, graduations, the marathon, etc. Then going down the ladder, small amounts of income could also come from the cafe, membership program where you sell memberships to the Conservancy, and you maybe in exchange you get a discount in the cafe. You get free bocce on Tuesday nights, that kind of thing. And then in the future, when Union Station can come on board, it could be that it would also add, in a small part at least, to that income generation, revenue generation for the park. So if we assume those earned incomes that I just went through, if we assume some modest amount of philanthropy, which you see here, we still have a delta between what is needed for expenses and what we have. So we've looked at various strategies for closing that gap. One is adjacent parking, and adjacent parking would be the parking on the edges of the park, metering that parking and having the revenue from those meters go to the upkeep of the park. That's one strategy. Another strategy is to look at a parking district in that business improvement district when especially events are held and parking is charged on those lots. That income could go to the maintenance operations for the park. And then a business improvement district, which obviously takes time, but over time could have this kind of impact on the revenue needed to maintain the park. And this is something we've been reviewing with the Alliance. All of these topics we've been working with the Alliance on. Lots of work to do to put this in place, but this is all conservative in terms of the way the numbers were done and the projections we think are possible. and that then would close the gap. And that assumes no government spending, and that's probably not a logical assumption. There probably will be government participation in the maintenance of the park. So we think that's a good, solid strategy, work to be done on all of those outside of our control, but we think all good. Now, Union Station, we wanted to touch briefly on the asset we think lies next to our park and could be an asset to the park. It's not currently in the MAPS funding for the park. We don't currently even own it, but we think it's a great thing to keep in mind. There are ways that building could be used, and you see the kind of list here, both for the front part, the beautiful front part, and the warehouse part in the rear. And there are precedents all over for reusing those kinds of buildings for weddings and restaurants, and even maintenance staff could be housed there. So we recommend that that be considered. And that takes me to my final slide. The bottom two, I'd like to start with the bottom two. Those are the things we can control and are looking for approval of, if not today, in the near future, hopefully, that we can continue with phase one, design and documentation, so we stay on schedule and get that asset opened and being used so that people begin to understand the reality of the park, use it, flock to it. We want to continue our coordination with the other projects that surround us, which we've been doing and we want to continue doing. Then the top three are recommendations that we are making to you, that I think would then be recommendations to make to City Council, that those initiatives be begun that are ancillary to the park but important to the park. And that concludes my presentation.
If you would stay at the podium for a moment, Kim, I would like to call on you for any comments that you have, and then any member of the advisory board, Mary Margaret, will be available to answer your questions. Kim?
Well, again, Mary Margaret, on behalf of the entire Park Subcommittee, certainly I would imagine our advisory board and all of Oklahoma City, we want to again congratulate Hargraves on putting together a wonderful and very documentative 300-page report on this draft for the Parks Master Plan. It's obvious that even from the very first recommendations package that we put together, you've listened to not only everything that's come from the subcommittee and this advisory committee, but each and every response in your surveys and public, and we could not appreciate that anymore.
Thank you.
This project was, the presentation you see today was also provided to the subcommittee yesterday. And in lieu of this last slide, we feel very empowered to bring to you a recommendation of action, which I think each of you have in front of you, and I would like to read that. Fellow advisory board members, today you've received a presentation from Hargraves Associates recapping the MAPS 3 Downtown Public Park Master Draft Plan. The presentation was also received yesterday afternoon by the MAPS 3 Subcommittee to begin our discussion, review, and commentary of the entire 300-page report. As this report is very detailed and deserves adequate time for a thorough review, the subcommittee members are currently preparing their commentaries for submittal to the MAPS 3 department by August 5th. In turn, the MAPS 3 department will create a single document from those individual responses that then will be submitted to Hargraves so that a final plan may be presented to the subcommittee for approval in August, with anticipation of moving that to the council in early September. In addition to this step, I am asking that this board send a recommendation of action to the City Council addressing the near-term action items you see before you today. These actions are crucial in providing indispensable information necessary in order to properly evaluate and establish the ways and means of funding park operations in all three phases of the projects. I therefore propose the following recommendation for your consideration and approval, and I quote, "The MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board members respectfully request the City Council take immediate action on these items. Number one, the formation of the OKC Downtown Parks Conservancy and identification of the president of the board. Number two, begin work on the formation of a Downtown Parks Business Improvement District. Number three, create a Downtown Parks Parking District whereby funds from the parking meter surrounding the downtown park go directly to downtown parks operations and maintenance. And finally, begin the process of determining the necessary funds to purchase and renovate the historic Union Station by ordering an appraisal so this building can be utilized to its greatest potential as outlined in the MAPS 3 Downtown Park Public Master Plan." In addition, the MAPS 3 Downtown Park Subcommittee will continue its action on the remaining items, meaning number 5, continue coordination with the other projects that directly relate to Downtown Park, the MAPS 3 Convention Center, the MAPS 3 Transit Streetcar, and the Boulevard. And finally, we will continue our work with due diligence in the process of beginning Phase 1 design and documentation for the MAPS 3 Downtown Park.
Kim, thank you. I want to make sure that everyone understands you're going to get a chance to ask questions about this project too, but I want to ask Amanda a procedural question here. Do we have our agenda appropriately, have we given appropriate notice to take the action that we're considering here?
Well, the agenda item on this council, or this board's agenda, is a presentation, so it's not an action item. The only items that could be provided would be under new business. New business is listed as item number 12. New business is defined under the Oklahoma Open Records Act, or Open Meetings Act, as any business that is new and not reasonably anticipated at the time of posting the agenda. It appears that this item, being a recommendation for council to start and initiate a process, could be handled through direction to staff. Direction could be given to MAP staff to provide this information to the city manager, who could then forward on the information to city council in a city manager report, or through the liaison, council liaison that we have present today.
I was going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, also that, and Ms. Lowe, it might be appropriate also that when we finish this master plan, that we couple that and bundle it all together and send it on to council at that time?
I believe that the sense of urgency is that these things need to begin having action, whereas there's no guarantee at this point that the master plan would go to the city council in September. It could be further than that. We don't know. Our anticipation is it is September. So we feel that taking action on this sooner is being a little bit more proactive than possibly reactive.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I want to give the other members of the board a chance to ask any questions that they'd like to have. We'll come back to Kim's recommendation, but I don't want to miss the chance for you to ask questions. Nathaniel?
Well, very impressive presentation, and especially impressive on talking about how you plan to pay for operations, so I commend you for that, Mary Margaret and Kim, your committee. And it actually reminds me of our own committee meetings yesterday for the streetcar. We had a presentation from the Alliance for Economic Development talking about the park bid, so I'm glad to learn more about it. And I guess I want to maybe ask or, render an opinion about if we might be able to consider expanding it, because there's a mention of if the streetcar were to go to the west side of the park, then you could have a bid that would help that operation as well. And so I just wanted to put out there while it's a topic to say, love to talk to you guys about being able to expand that and support what you're trying to do and make it a all-inclusive kind of one-time solution on continued operations. So I've been very impressed with what you've come up with. So thank you.
Great.
Other questions? Pete?
I too am impressed with, truthfully, I'm impressed with this recommendation for action that really is a result of your plan. So the idea that that somebody is looking at how we pay for it as we go through the process, to me, is really an important process. That's really a step in the right direction. And I think, as he indicated, that's something the streetcar people ought to look at also, because that's going to be a big problem. And this is an opportunity for those that are going to benefit most directly from an economic development standpoint, could put some skin in the game. And I think that's a very, very positive idea.
Great.
I do have a question. I received a letter this week from a gentleman who is interested in preservation, and he was very concerned about the destruction of that Film Exchange building, which I've raised with David a number of times myself. It just seems to me that Oklahoma City, as much as any city in the country, should learn from the problems of destroying historically significant buildings. We just can't seem to stop doing it. I mean, No matter what happens, there's always another reason. There's always a, let's clean the slate and start over. We did it at the Bicentennial Park. Admittedly, it looks nice, but it was very disrespectful to the 50 years that went on of life over there. The same thing, I'm worried that the same thing will happen here if we're not careful in taking these buildings down. That building especially. That building dates back into the early 1900s. It has historical significance. It's still well built. It just seems to me that it could be integrated into a park plan.
Well, we took
And again, on this point, excuse me for interrupting, but I'm not speaking for the council on that regard. I'm speaking for me. I'm a preservationist. I always say this. So I say it if 8 other people are saying no, I'm saying yes, because I just don't believe that we pay enough significance to our history. I'll say it 4 or 5 times here if I'm not careful.
Well, thank you. And we agree. We took a really hard look at the Film Exchange building because we, too, thought that was maybe the one on that Robinson Street edge that had potential. There was extensive study done, both by the Planning Department and by Butzer Gardner, into its structural attributes and its reusability possibilities, its adaptability possibilities. It has a lot of structural issues. It has a lot of issues that make it difficult for reuse in other ways. It also has parking site issues. You know, without parking, it's hard to imagine how it might be used. And once you add surface parking, it really does sort of it's not a good urban thing for the park. Also, a number of groups, I think up to 8 groups, were led through it. Groups who might use it, nonprofits, developers, were led through the building to see if any interest could be generated in using it, and there was absolutely none because all of those groups saw so many problems with it. And the conclusion of that study was Union Station has great potential. It has all those things that you talked about and is a realistically adaptable building. Let's put our focus there. All those groups were dying to get into Union Station, the ones who couldn't see how they could possibly use
Because we've
Film
already
Exchange.
spent millions of dollars on Union Station. If we'd spend the same amount of money on the Film Exchange building, everybody would be dying to get there, too.
Well, it's more of a, believe it or not, it's inherent issues, not just structural issues. It's inherent issues into the size of the building. It's too big for a cafe. It doesn't work for offices. It has a lot of issues.
Debating you on this is not going to get me anywhere, nor you either. But there is no preservation of a historic building that doesn't face the very same things you're talking about. They were built 100 years ago. And when you build a building 100 years ago, it is going to have issues and continue to readapt it for today. My view is it's worth doing.
Right.
If others don't believe it's worth doing, well, it won't get done. I understand that. But my view is it's worth doing, and it's worth me speaking out and saying I think it is worth doing.
I'll just say one more thing. We're afraid that there's the potential, with no one interested in doing that it would sit there as a boarded-up building within the park. That would be the worst possible thing for the park.
Other questions? Dee?
I have one question. Since you're anticipating, hopefully, 2 large events to help fund this, what do you anticipate that they will be, considering now we've got the Downtown Air Park that will be hosting music, and we've had lots of concerts and benefits lately, and everyone seems to find a space to do that. What do you think it would be, music or?
Definitely music is one of the things that has come up. We've been meeting with SMG, do I have that right? We've been meeting with SMG, and they have tons of ideas and ways that they would program that event space and events that they could put there that they can't put anywhere else because of size. But music is definitely an immediate target.
Okay, what would some other things be, other events?
Well, it could be, you could easily host food festivals there. You know, you don't necessarily need the promontory for that, but you could host food festivals there. An expansion, let's face it, the arts festival is so popular and continues to grow, it could expand in that direction. Movies, outdoor movies, dance in the park, you know, there's just any number of possibilities, graduations, etc.
Okay, my compliments on finding solutions for funding it, too. I think it's really important.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Michael?
From a master plan standpoint, the Upper Park, or the Phase 1, I guess, we've pushed out maybe a year, a little over a year. Is that correct? It was originally thought to be in 14 because we thought the boulevard was going to be ready, and that's not going to happen.
Exactly. It's not quite a year, but it does push it to the next calendar year.
So we're still trying to coordinate with the opening
Yes.
of the boulevard and things like that. Those projects have just been pushed out.
Absolutely.
Other questions? Well, then let's revisit the issue of how we get the subcommittee's message to the council. Amanda, you need to listen carefully to this so I don't misstate it. I'm thinking that Amanda has told us that this item 4, I guess it is not on the agenda for action. So we could consider this as an action item under new business in item 12, Kim, or we could direct staff to take this message to the city manager and have it included in the city manager's report to the council. I guess I'm interested in knowing how you all think might be the most effective way to do it. Do you have any concerns about this being included under new business under the definition that you gave us, Amanda?
I do have some concern because the question is whether or not it was reasonably foreseen, as it could have been an action item on this agenda. And so I feel the most appropriate way, if the board is agreeable to this, would be to direct staff. You have the ability to tell staff to take this to the city manager, and then the city manager can put this on council as a city manager report.
Thank you.
It would be my preference to use this as a direction to staff rather than bring it up as new business, as this was part of this entire discussion and presentation.
Is a motion required to make that a direction to staff?
No, the board member can just direct staff.
Noted.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone that wants to be heard in opposition to that, or are we able to say that we're sending a unanimous direction to staff to carry this message to the city manager and have it included in his report to the council? All right. Let's have it so noted in the minutes that that's to be done. Other questions for Mary Margaret or for the subcommittee?
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say that as in the advisory board team, if you haven't had a chance to read this document, I know there's quite a bit this week between the transit study and the parks study. It is a wonderfully worded document with a lot of information, and we would appreciate any input, questions, or additions that you have. If you would like to email those to David Todd, those will also be included on the information that goes to Hargraves.
I guess on the next step, then, the subcommittee is going to spend some time reviewing it, making their comments, and eventually this whole 300-page report will be forwarded up. Is that how?
Correct. Right. Yesterday, we left with homework that each of the subcommittee members will do a thorough review, listing anything that they would like to ask, to add, any concerns, questions. All of that will be sent to the MAPS department, to David Todd, by August 5th. Then that will be compiled into one large document, including any of the responses that you might have as well. And that will go to Hargraves so that that can then be vetted and prepared and presented back to the subcommittee in August, with anticipation that that becomes a final draft, which could then be moved to the council in September.
Well, I want to add just a word of congratulations to Kim and Mike Dover, the vice chair, and to all of those who have been working on this. The meetings are really interesting, well attended. We got a lot of public input, and I just say to you, I think we're really keeping on track on this, Kim, and I appreciate you and Mike pushing us along here, and we are all excited about the prospects of the new park. Any other questions? Okay, then let's move to item 5. Is that, David? The resolution approving change order number 1?
Yes, sir. This is recommend resolution approving change order number 1 for MAPS 3 Downtown Public Park, Upper Park Demolition Package 2, increase of $6,670, project M3-P007. This is a project that was previously approved for removal of some buildings and the change order involves some asphalt that was left out there. The demolition was for the buildings only, and this asphalt was left after the buildings were removed. It was orphaned out there, kind of looked bad, so we authorized them to go ahead and remove that asphalt. Also, there was a lot of weeds and things out there that weren't in the current mowing package that we had. So that's what this change order is, and we'd ask that you would approve this for us.
Subcommittee want to be heard on that, Kim?
Yes, this was presented yesterday at the subcommittee and passed with unanimous vote.
Would you like to make a motion? All right. Motion been made and seconded that we adopt a resolution approving this change order. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution is adopted. That brings us to item number 6. David, as you begin, I want to tell Bradley Wynn, who is here to speak on this, that you'll have an opportunity to speak after David makes his presentation here. So we'll be calling on you then, Bradley. Thank you. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a recommended resolution approving final specifications for MAPS 3 Downtown Public Park Demolition Bidding Package 4 and authorizing the city clerk to advertise for bids to be received on September 4th, 2013, project M3-P011. This is an additional demolition package. We've currently gone block by block. This is the beginning of a process that we have to go through to do the demolition for the buildings in the park, and these specifically still need some additional review. The subcommittee yesterday approved, after much discussion, this item. After your hopeful approval today, we receive that, then we will go to the planning department to get the certificate of authority to remove the buildings, and then still these specifications still go to city council for approval. So bulldozers are not going to show up tomorrow. This is part of the process that we have to go through.
Okay. Bradley Wynn is here, a citizen who wanted to be heard on this particular item. Bradley, you're welcome.
My name is Bradley Wynn. I'm a writer and historian here in Oklahoma City. I've kind of become a de facto urban archaeologist over the past 10 years when I became involved in creating the Oklahoma City Film Row District. That's a really great area that had a very unique history that a lot of people weren't aware of. It was also an area filled with many buildings that were heavily blighted. There was absolutely no plans for its future except probably its demolition. We were able to rediscover this history that it had, and through that process encourage people to save that area. Today is a fast-growing area. There's a waiting list for space. We already have new construction in the future for it, and I couldn't be more happy for that. As a result of that, telling the story of Film Row, I had to delve into that history, and I began to learn about the film exchange process, which goes back to the invention of the movie camera. And here in the territories, movies are very popular for obvious reasons, and the first film exchange offices, which were distribution offices, appeared here in 1907 in Oklahoma City. And at one point, up to 1965, there were about 300 scattered across the cityscape throughout its entire history. In the early 19-teens, they found out very quickly that film was nitrate-based. It was very flammable. And so the city planners at that time didn't want the city to burn down with these film exchanges intermixed within their timber-constructed buildings. So they changed building codes requiring fireproof buildings. The Film Exchange building was one of 3 of those buildings built at that time. It is the second one ever built in Oklahoma City with those fireproof codes. It has very thick floors, very thick walls, and some remnants of its film vaults, fireproof film vaults. That particular building was built by the Vitagraph Film Company. Their first building was built at Reno and Hudson, which is still utilized today. They built it for use by Warner Brothers, MGM, Paramount Pictures, and the list goes on. It was utilized by them up until about 1936, when most of the film businesses were centering around Grand Avenue, which is now Sheridan today, so they could just kind of consolidate all their business there. And the building was later picked up by the City Rescue Mission and used for some number of years. And then as that area changed and its demographics changed, all of the businesses and the homes and such that were in there just kind of began to disappear piece by piece. This particular building is unique because it was kind of there at the beginning of the development of that neighborhood, and it is now about the only thing left standing that has some significance in that neighborhood. The lintel in the building says that great Art Deco font, Film Exchange, and it has stood there through the test of time and amazingly survived urban renewal all of these years. Me, as a historian, I look at our city very differently. I like writing about its history. I like uncovering its unique stories, from the Chinese underground to the time when we had our own land rush. In fact, just across the street was where we played our very first baseball game 2 days after that land run. The Film Exchange building, to me, can be a building that can be repurposed, just as we repurposed the buildings in our Film Row area. Those buildings were considered beyond repair. Nobody would go there. In fact, it wasn't called Film Row then. It was called Skid Row, because through time, as demographics changed and history changed, especially the economics of the city, it became blighted, heavily populated by bars, prostitutes, drug use, etc. I know that this building doesn't look like much, but it really does have a lot to offer, including a basement. It can be used as a multi-use building very easily. Restaurants on ground floor, retail window shopping, residential or offices upstairs. There's a basement that would make a great wine cellar for said restaurant. I just hope that the building use within the overall plan could be reconsidered instead of demolition in it. I would hate to see that happen. As we all know, urban renewal really hurt this city badly, and I've got photographs showing many, many acres of red dirt. The city back in its day, you'd swear, looked like downtown New York City, and I hate to see more of that be torn down. I love the plans. I love where our city is going, but it's very important for me as a historian and a citizen of this city to incorporate the legacy that we are building upon and to remember those who built this city and made it as great as it is today.
Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on the item before us? Michael?
Tom, at yesterday's subcommittee, as Kim pointed out, when this was brought up for discussion, or for approval and discussion, and the vote was taken, I actually didn't say anything. I sat there kind of quietly because I hadn't heard, kind of, for lack of a better term, the other side of why we might not want to do this at this time. And when David asked me what my vote was, I thought about it, and I supported what everyone else on the subcommittee did. I voted aye. And after that vote was taken at the end of the meeting, when comments from citizens, when it was time to do that, there was a young man who came and spoke against the destruction, demolition of those buildings. And I sat there and listened to this young man, and as stated today, we all know what happened with urban renewal, particularly some of us older folks on this subcommittee, or this advisory board. And it was so exciting to hear a young man, probably in his 20s, with that same kind of concern. And I went home and thought about it, and I thought, I don't know how I could just really support that. I wish I would have heard that young man's points before actually that vote was taken. And after hearing what was said today, I just don't see the sense of urgency that we have to make this decision to demolish these buildings at this point. I would like to see more information and more of a conversation and discussion about the possible reuse of that. So on the vote today, I'm going to vote no, and I hope other folks might consider that.
Anyone else?
For just these two buildings, or is it all of the other buildings that are in the area down here?
Well, we've done demolition already for the block that's right adjacent to the Skydance Bridge, and then the next block to the north, it will happen any time. The contractor has got that scheduled, and this is just for those two buildings. I might add, the planning department, and I think, Hans, weren't you part of that, took several groups through there to try and and get some interest. And Hans, would you want to talk any about the condition of the buildings at all? Or Hans Bootzer is part of the Hargraves team. Mary Margaret had to leave to catch her flight back to New York.
Hans, welcome.
Right, again, Hans Butzer with Butzer Gardner Architects. Mr. Wynn, I'm a huge fan of your work. In fact, I office in Film Row, and I'm in the process of building a new building there in the heart of Film Row. So I'm a huge fan and a big fan of existing buildings, and certainly I think the Park Subcommittee shared the same sentiment as our whole design team did when we started looking at this project, thinking surely we can take a hard look at some of these existing buildings, and certainly the Film Exchange is a significant building. We did about 5 months of extensive research on the existing buildings. Most of the focus of our work tended in the end towards the Film Exchange building as being something that had a lot of potential. And ultimately, the issue comes down to finding a user. We worked with the city, reached out to many organizations that we identified as being park-compatible uses. And again, that ties back to Mary Margaret's point about, most of the time when someone wants to use a building, they need parking. And we certainly don't want parking lots in our beautiful downtown park. So finding the right kind of user is critical that will not get hung up on not having on-site parking. Those users went through the building in several tours, several groups over a period of weeks. Not a single one expressed an interest and said to us or anyone else, we want you to hold off. We think we can get the money together to repurpose this building and be able to secure to you that by the time the park opens, this building won't be boarded up. The biggest concern when we think of the park as a legacy park, this will speak for hundreds of years to the city as its big green lawn complementing Mary Gardens. The last thing you want to do is endanger the viability of the park by having a boarded up building still sitting in that park. Safety and security, I think we would all agree, is one of the top priorities. A boarded up building will not communicate that to park users. So again, while the building may be something of a real intrigue, without question, its historic significance is something that is causing us to talk about it today and extensively over the months of research. The big question is, where is the user that will accept this building, make a commitment, not need the parking, and be a great partner to this public park?
Hans, Mr. Dover has suggested that maybe we ought to have more information about it. Listening to you and Mary Margaret, I get the sense that there's been a lot of study, and as
Without
you
question.
described,
Without question.
if there was any other information to be brought forward, what would it be?
Yes, we have, Michael.
Well, again, I bring up the question of timing. How critical is it, and I know it's got to go through planning, and there's a process, but how critical is it in your thinking, because of where we are, not even basically still in phase one, still, how critical is it that we do this now?
Do which part? If you could.
Pass this resolution and go begin the process of going through the planning commission and ultimately the council to demolish the buildings. How critical is that?
Hans, I can answer that.
Please.
But Mr. Dover, if you want to continue this item till next month or whenever, it's not critical today that we pass this. However, we're trying to proceed on with the park plans, and because it's going to take us a while to get on to through the planning commission process and on the council, that's why we had it on here.
Kim?
If I may speak, first of all, I'd like to start with saying that the passion that you have for Oklahoma City is instilled in every single one of those subcommittee members' hearts and minds. When we very first began discussions on what our park requirements would be for whoever our consultant was, there are pages and pages that constantly note, save every piece of property, save every tree, save every brick, save every piece of concrete, save everything that makes that part of Oklahoma, Oklahoma. But as we well know, when we try to put in a 70-acre park in downtown where there are buildings existing, where there are other things existing, not everything can stay. And so because we're not specialists in preservation or in park planning, we enlisted our consultant to do its due diligence in saying what could be saved and what couldn't be saved. We even went into conversations of if entire buildings couldn't be saved, could we memorialize any part of them? Could we save a piece of the architecture and put it somewhere else? Maybe as a piece of art in the park, or maybe somewhere else in Oklahoma City. Wouldn't it be great if we could do a film study or even a photographical study of these things and put them in Union Station so that everything that we're talking about isn't lost, but then everything that can be saved is saved. I think yesterday when this vote came to the subcommittee, it was the most heart-wrenching vote we've had to make. And we made it based on facts and information. The facts and information that took many months of studying and evaluating that were presented to us. Had one entity come to us and said, please, we'd like to take a look at it, I think our vote would have been different. We would have had different information. But with the information we had in front of us, we made the best vote we could. And it's a difficult vote, and we will have more difficult votes as this process goes on. What I may suggest is that today we move this forward to council. Council has the final say-so on this. If they would like to spend more time finding ways or helping find developers or giving this more time, they have that at their option. But our role and responsibility is to keep this project moving with the information that we have, to voice the concerns that we do along the way, and to let our council guide us with their wisdom, their judgment, and all of the information that they have from more of that 30,000 feet.
Thank you, Kim. Dee?
Yes, I think this needs further study. I think that the film industry in Oklahoma is just on the verge of erupting. I think this possibly could end up being a campus for film or something like that. I mean, I think that we need to take a look into it, and I don't believe there's any rush to get it demolished right away. I really don't. I think it deserves a little more work. My opinion.
Anyone else?
I would tell you this. We had a lot of conversation today about users, that you don't have a user. You know who saved the Union Station? Wasn't some outside users, the city of Oklahoma City, through COTPA, saved Union Station. Otherwise, we'd be talking about Union Station the same way we're talking about this building, had the Oklahoma City not stepped up and put millions of dollars into that building. So sometimes the private sector, and for good reason, they operate on a different balance sheet than cities do. But sometimes the private sector is not willing to step up and do something that, looking back on it, the fact that the city did it made a huge historical difference to Oklahoma City. And so we saved Union Station not through some guy that wanted to start a restaurant in Union Station, but through the city saying we need to repurpose this building. It's too important not to do that. So I support the idea of looking at it further. And also the idea, I'm yet to see a building being saved. I mean, so far we're doing the Bicentennial Park mess. Every building and everything in Bicentennial Park was just taken out and start over. So far, that's the same thing that's happened with this park. Everything's gone. So I don't think we ought to save the old meat market down there that's turned into the Salvation Army or the WIC headquarters or whatever. There are certain things down there they're going to have to go. But I do think 100 years from now, when people are looking back on it, they would appreciate the fact that we spent the extra time, the extra effort to try to preserve these things that are historical to the city.
All right. Bradley, yes, but I'd like for you to be brief. We spent about as much time as we're going to spend on this.
I understand that about what you're saying about the meetings and such. It's kind of like turning a book into a movie. You're never going to be able to put the whole book into the movie. But in this particular case, I think there was some information that may not have been included in those studies. For example, its history. Was its history included in those studies? Not just the marquee. Were you aware that there already was a group called the Asset Group that had acquired the building in 2009, but were denied permits by the city to renovate it because they wanted the core to shore? They were already willing to invest millions of dollars to renovate this building themselves. So I think that if the context were changed, if all the information were available, it might change the outcome for this.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, we have before us the resolution. Have we had a motion about it? We have not. Anybody want to move the adoption of the resolution? Hearing no motion to approve the resolution, the matter fails. Item 7, we are, this is another resolution that we're to consider. David, tell us about it.
Mr. Chairman, I would just ask that you offer any other motions that would like to be presented regarding that item. It could be a motion to deny or a motion to continue, any other items that...
Well, I thought I said, is there a motion regarding this? Is there any motion regarding this in any respect?
Could you come back next month again with more information, just without a motion of any kind?
Councilman, you took the words out of my mouth and said I would like to see more information brought forth within the next 30 days.
We can certainly do that.
Thank you. First to the subcommittee level, then to the advisory board.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, a question, is 30 days enough time to vet possible other uses? And maybe it is. I don't, off the top of my head, 30 days doesn't seem like a very long time, given the information that I just heard.
My idea behind the 30 days was to show that there was the possibility of usages, that there were more things that need to be investigated. Not that our decision needs to be made in 30 days, but within 30 days, if there is information that can be brought before us to tell us we need to take it further or make the decision, we have that.
Now, so am I understanding, Kim, then, that maybe the motion that is before us would be to table this matter for 30 days and put it on next month's agenda to reconsider? Is that what you're asking us to do, or what?
I believe it's more a direction to staff to collect more information about this, then bring it to the subcommittee in August, and then the very next day that information will come here to this group.
Okay. So we're taking no action today. Okay? Thank you. Okay. That brings us to the next item, David.
Item 7 is recommend resolution approving change order number 4 for MAPS 3, Oklahoma River Racecourse lighting improvements, Oklahoma River increase of $9,412, project M3-R002. This is the lighting project that we have on the river. There was an additional junction box that was needed in order to put another meter at this service point. And when I say service point, that's a place where the power comes in from OG&E to the transformer, and then it branches out to 1 to 2 of the light poles that I hope everybody saw a couple weeks ago that were lighted at the river. So this is a change order to add an additional meter there for ancillary equipment there at the river for $9,412. We ask your approval.
D?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve it. This was voted on unanimously by our committee.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt this resolution approving this change order. Is there further discussion? I have one question, D. I guess that this isn't an increase in the budget. It's just an earlier expenditure. Is that it?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It is adopted. David, item 8.
Item 8 is recommend resolution approving change order number 1 and amendment number 1 for MAPS 3, Oklahoma State Fairgrounds Phase 1, Project 2 parking lot improvements, decrease of $89,064.30, project M3-F001A. If you remember, change orders are items that were not originally in the project, so they're essentially new items, and amendments are items that were already in the project. And with these civil engineering-related projects, we have items that are specifically listed on there, and we can increase and decrease those items in that amendment. So the prices are already established in there, so if we take more or less, we know what that number is. The change order is a little different, but there were several items on here as we got into the project that we needed to change, and you'll see that there was ultimately a credit of $89,064.30. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well, this is quite a precedent for us, accepting a decrease in cost. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's adopted. Item 9, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 9 is recommend approval of final plans and specifications to be advertised for bids for MAPS 3 Trails Phase 1 West River Trail Connection, South Meridian Avenue to South Council Road, Project M3-T001. What we're doing is we're sending the final plans through the subcommittee and then through this advisory board. We still have to acquire right-of-way. We're in the middle of that, and you'll see the progress of that here at the end of the meeting. But these plans will sit until we get the right-of-way to the point that we can send them on to council and get these trails started. So we have a quick presentation here by Robbie Williams from Triad Design Group.
Okay, good morning. I'll be brief. The presentation I'm going to give you in our trail alignment is still the same that the City Council approved. Excuse me, from our preliminary report. Our construction cost is still the same, so essentially there's no change, but I'll briefly go through the project. Okay, we'll start at council. This is the overall slide, and I'll talk a little bit and then a little bit of detail on the others. But again, we start at council and go east to Meridian. As you recall, we did meet with City Care Inc., who has some activities going on at Crystal Lake, so we coordinated all that. The trail does go around Crystal Lake. We're actually going to install a short segment of sidewalk so that you can go from the trail to their pavilions. And at a minimum, the city's acquiring 50 feet of right-of-way. That will allow us to go in and clear some trees and brush to provide that safety for the users of the trail. From Council to Rockwell, basically the trail is on the north side of the river. We do have 2 tributary bridges that will span creeks. And then as we get to Rockwell, Rockwell is not a public roadway at that location, so we'll cross there. And then we will go around Crystal Lake, and we will cross Southwest 15th Street. We will provide the proper traffic signing and for the trail and the roadway. And then we'll continue along the trail on the north side, and then we will go under the MacArthur Boulevard Bridge. As we go east on MacArthur, we get into the city property. The city owns the majority of the property between MacArthur and Meridian. We will go around the north side of the sediment pond. That is the pond that catches all the silt before it gets into the river. So we've coordinated the trail with the Public Works Department. And as we go around there, we will go behind businesses, and there is a small path on top of the bank that we can use. And then we will go under the Meridian Avenue Bridge, and we will circle back up to Meridian Avenue and use, temporarily, we're going to use the sidewalk on the Meridian Avenue Bridge to cross over the river and connect to the trail on the south side. The City Public Works Department has a future trail bridge that will go in on the east side of the Meridian Avenue Bridge, and eventually they will make that true connection so we have our full width. So we're able to save MAPS money by doing that. One of the things that will be done is they are going to have a trail marking system with name and how far you are on the trail. Garber Engineering they have a detail of what that marker will look like in the next presentation. So that's kind of an overview. I think David mentioned the land acquisition and a construction schedule, and we're requesting that our bidding documents be approved. As I stated, the construction cost, we're still estimating it at $3,700,000. That's the same cost that was in the preliminary report. And our project budget is a little over $4.5 million. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Sue?
We did not have a quorum yesterday, but the member and myself that was at the committee meeting feel confident with this plan. We've already approved it once. We're just bringing it back to you to go forward with the bidding process. So we would like for you to take action on this, and I recommend approval of this plan. I make a motion to approve this plan.
It's been moved that we approve the final plans and specifications under item 9. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. Thank you, Robbie. Item 10, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 10 is recommend approval of final plans and specifications to be advertised for bids for MAPS 3 Trails Phase 1 West River Trail Connection, South Council Road to Northwest 10th Street, Project M3-T001A. This is a companion item to the project that you just saw. It connects with that project and is the same circumstance. The plans are complete. We would like to put them on the shelf till we can get the right-of-way acquired and then send them on to council and start building this trail. So we have Curtis Brown from Garver Engineers here today to give you a short presentation.
Curtis, welcome.
All right, thank you. Likewise, I know we're running long, so I'll go through it very quickly. Again, the trail alignment is substantially the same as what has been previously presented, picking up at in the Triads Trail at Council Road, going underneath that bridge. We do have an alternate for a parking lot, a trailhead at that location as well. So we proceed on west on the north bank of the river and then changing over toward the east side of the river. We take a little portion of the Rush Trucking parking lot and realign there and then drop down underneath I-40. A little later in the presentation, we have a little retaining wall and bridge that we are doing underneath I-40. I'll show you as for that crossing. We come back up on I-40, back on the overbank of the river, proceeding on up until we hit Reno. We drop underneath Reno on a nice little shelf there, continue on around on the north side of Reno. We have another trailhead parking lot, and then we proceed up and around the landfill area, skirting the edge, and then following a nice wide utility easement, proceeding all the way up to 10th Street, where we connect to an existing trailhead for the Overholser trail system. And we also are creating a third small parking lot there, also as a design alternate. Status of our right-of-way. We're in good shape on the right-of-way. We have the parcels. We have 2 parcels that are currently being under contract. Some title work is being addressed there. 2 more parcels that our offers have been extended, not accepted, and the remaining parcels on our trail are pretty well closed. And so we're moving very quickly, and the Oklahoma City staff has been excellent at helping that part move extremely well on this. So we're looking forward to that. Quick overview of design, 5-inch asphalt section on a 6-inch base. Our section of the trail is 3.5 miles long. It's 12 foot for the entire width, except for where we go underneath I-40. We're actually widened it because of the retaining walls, just to give the feeling of a little greater buffer and safety. We widened that to 16 feet just for the aesthetics and the general feel of it, so it should provide a pleasing environment there. All the slopes are on average around 2 to 3%, with one section just going underneath I-40 where we go to 6, still compliant with all the trail standards and ADA standards that does slope, so no issues there. I already talked about the parking lots, and we have some site amenities that'll be at these trailhead locations that are also alternates. I failed to mention that we do have a signalized pedestrian crossing at 10th Street. That is our only at-grade crossing on this section of the trail. It will be push-button activated by pedestrians. Automotive traffic will always have right-of-way until somebody activates that push button on either the north or south side of 10th Street, and it'll stop traffic and people can safely cross and join that. And that's been through traffic and approved. This is a view of the retaining wall that we have underneath I-40 and section, kind of what it's going to look like. Be kind of steep on the downhill side, short on the uphill side. The uphill wall is mainly to catch any debris or riprap or anything that may roll down the slope to keep it from entering the trail. The south side is really the structural side of this embankment. And we have specified a stacked stone that has this weathered edge, have a nice tan coloring to it. So with the texture and color, it should prevent an environment that is discouraging to some of our local artists from wanting to use this as a template, and be very easy to clean and maintain. As a cost savings option, we did look at a pedestrian bridge instead of that retaining wall underneath. Right now it's looking like they're about the same, but there is a possibility to doing a truss bridge instead of that wall. I want to present that to you, but we have that also as a thing that we are finalizing with staff right now, and would be incorporated in as an alternate should staff proceed that into the plans. Some of the amenities, very quickly, we have some trail edging, a metal edging that goes on the edge of the asphalt trail. It keeps the asphalt from unraveling, grass from encroaching in, makes it much, much easier for maintenance, a nice clean edge for people to weed eat against, but also confine and a strong physical barrier from that Bermuda from coming in. We think it'll prolong the life of the trail, as well as give easier maintenance and service there. We have right-of-way fencing on the trail. It'll be black-coated chain link, similar to this picture, just without the barbed wire. The black-coated just really disappears as a shadow to the human eye as you're riding down there, and so it won't feel like you're riding in a prison, but yet you'll have the security because this is a fairly remote area, an industrial area that our trail is in. And we have a post and cable system around all the parking lots, again, to give an open air feel, but yet still prevent vehicles from being able to just drive on down and have ease of access to the trail, and so keep cars where they need to belong. A couple of the amenities as alternates are shelters and benches, and as Robbie mentioned, we have distance markers that will be very similar to these 6x6 cedar or Doug fir mile markers, and actually a tenth of miles all up and down both sections of the trail. Future activities, the land acquisition, I briefly talked about. We do have 2 outstanding coordination items. We have a maintenance agreement with the Department of Transportation for the I-40 crossing. Their legal department is currently drafting that agreement, and you should see that, or City Council should see that here in a matter of a couple of weeks. And the very same thing with the Union Pacific Railroad, where we cross underneath one of their bridges as well. They are finalizing in their legal department that agreement as well, just a crossing permit. And likewise, we're close enough where we can smell the finish line. Our documents are complete, and so, like David said, again, I'm sitting on a shelf asking for you to approve our plans. Where we're looking at on budget, I guess before you approve, you probably want to know what I'm asking you to sign up for. We got a base bid of about $3.2 million. The 3 bid alternates for the parking lots are about another $475. The shelters and some of the other amenities add up to about $330 for a total, if all-inclusive total project cost of just shy of $4 million, still a $500,000 underneath the programmed budget, a very comfortable place to be.
Sue?
Again, we feel very comfortable with this presentation. Are there any questions?
I have just 2. On the 6-inch stabilized base, are you bringing in an aggregate or using natural materials that will be found along the trail?
We're actually looking at a cementatious stabilized, like a fly ash or cement stabilizing of the native soils for that stabilized base. So not looking at importing anything other than that chemical.
And did the subcommittee have any preference whether we do a retaining wall or the alternate bridge crossing?
No.
I like the bridge, just aesthetically. I think it brings a lot to a trail.
Yeah, we're pursuing that based on purely on a cost base. Whichever one is the least expensive is the way we're trying to pursue that underneath I-40.
Thanks for coming in under budget as well.
Other questions?
So I move, recommend approval of the final plans and specifications to advertise for bids.
Been moved and seconded that we approve item 10. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It is approved. That brings us to item 11. David, just before you start, I want to ask Mark and Beck a question. Our target is usually an hour. We've been here an hour and 15 minutes. Are we okay? No one's going to run us out of the room? So we're okay. Well, all right. Thank you. I would ask everyone who follows to be respectful of the time. We've got a lot of volunteers here who sometimes want to get back to work. So I would appreciate your consideration of that. David?
Item 11, Mr. Chairman, is recommend resolution approving Adventure District Line feasibility study for the MAPS 3 Transit Modern Streetcar Project, Project M3-S003. There's been a lot of interest in the Adventure Line, so we were asked to do a report, and today we have Lee Nichols from Jacobs Engineering here to give us a presentation on this report that was given to the subcommittee yesterday.
Lee, welcome. I want to mention, too, that I have a request from Marion Hutchison to comment on this as well, and you'll be given a chance to do that at the conclusion of Lee's presentation, Marion. Lee?
Well, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to come here and present our results of the feasibility study on the Venture District Line. Kind of the purpose of our study was to look at three potential alternatives for the Venture District Line, which included an extended or an upgraded excursion service, a commuter rail service using a diesel multiple unit or DMU, and also a modern streetcar alternative. The line, the Venture District Line today, we broke it out into three segments. Segment one is currently owned by COPTA, and the Oklahoma Rail Museum currently operates an excursion train on that segment once a month, a few times a year. Segment two is owned by COPTA, and it's currently leased to the UP. They have two clients that they serve on that line. One is a petroleum-based company, another one is a grain service. And then segment three, which is owned by the UP, and segment three is down in the Bricktown area. Segment three is basically out of service. The UP does use a small segment to back up the trains, but the majority of that segment is categorized as out of service. We went out some field surveys and did some analysis of the conditions, and like I said, I'll go through this fairly quickly to respect the time. Segment one, is in fair to poor condition. The ballast conditions varies. There's some grass, growing within the track. The excursion service that operates today they operate about 10 miles per hour, but trains that operate on that line are limited to no more than 20 miles per hour. The excursion, they run that 10 miles just for safety reasons. Segment two, it's in fair condition. The UP, operates on this regularly, so the UP maintains the segment, and they operate at, basically 10 miles per hour, primarily for safety reasons. Segment three, like I mentioned, is inactive. The tracks and roadbed are in poor condition. And I think one area of that segment, there's a tree growing in the middle between the tracks. So we get into train control, and that's signaling at crossings. Segment one, there is no the signaling, controlling the train movements. There are cross bucks at crossings. When the Rail Museum does operate, they use flaggers at those intersections when the train crosses. Segment 2, as I mentioned, the UP operates currently on that segment, and all their movements are controlled via radio with their headquarters. And again, they do operate at 10 miles per hour. There are existing at-grade crossings. Majority of them do have just the crossbucks, which are the railroad sign. There are flashers and bells at 36th, 30th, and Lincoln, and Northeast 4th Street does have gates, bells, and signs. So the first alternative is we're calling the extended excursion alternative. To operate this, we need some critical upgrades to the track segments in 1 and 2. There's no new passing tracks required. To get into the Bricktown area, you would need to have build the tracks on the segment 3 area. And they would utilize the existing train set that they use today for the excursion service. And again, it would terminate Bricktown. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'll get into the connection to the intermodal hub within the Bricktown area. The next one is the upgraded excursion alternative. This is where we would actually upgrade the track and train signaling, and that would enable to use higher speeds. Again, they could use the existing train set they use today or an upgraded train set, but with the upgraded improvements, you could reach higher train speeds along the corridor. The map here we're showing, again, this highlights the 3 operating, the details of the upgrade excursion alternatives. We have the 3 stations, Adventure District at the north, a station at the Oklahoma Railway Museum, and a station at the Intermodal Hub or Bricktown. And again, I'll get into more detail in that here in a couple minutes. For extended service, or if they want to operate more than 1 train set, passing tracks would be required, and this would be able to get more frequent service than what they currently run today. Next is our DMU, or commuter rail alternative. This are a type of vehicle that is a all-encompassing one vehicle where you have the passengers and the engine in one vehicle, similar to what they operate down in Dallas with the Trinity Railway Express, the Denton commuter line that runs from Denton into, I believe, Carrollton operates those types of vehicles. To operate a commuter service, this would require a considerable amount of rail upgrades, and that downtown connection to the Intermodal Hub is very critical when we start talking about commuter rail. Here we're showing we have 5 stations for the commuter rail operation. Again, at the North Adventure District, the Railroad Museum, one at 23rd Street, a second at 10th, and the final termination at the Intermodal Hub. And the operation of this would be primarily during your peak commute hours. In the morning, say between 6 and 9 o'clock, and in the evening, say from 4 to 7, and some Saturday service. And you could also run, say, an afternoon train. And these operating scenarios that we're showing today are just for our costing purposes on the operation and maintenance costs. And these can be tweaked if and when service is implemented. Our third alternative is the modern streetcar alternative. As you know, we are looking at the downtown streetcar. This would provide an option where you could actually run the streetcar from downtown off of the route that's the system that's being proposed, and take it out to the Venture District. One of the benefits of modern streetcar going to the Venture District is, as many of you know, that terminal station is a bit of a distance away from the major activity centers there. The modern streetcar could provide that last mile connection, so it could actually extend north of that terminal station, go into the street, and serve the zoo, the Science Museum, and also Remington Park. To do this service, though, there is major rehabilitation need to take place. All new track would have to be put in. The vehicles could be, typical catenary vehicles, or it could be an off-wire vehicle. There's been talk of a CNG-powered vehicle. Those are options that could also be used. One thing that would have to be taking place is what's called temporal separation. Modern streetcar vehicles aren't Federal Railroad Administrative compliant vehicles, so freight operations and streetcar operations couldn't happen at the same time. Options would be to have, separated tracks where freight operates on one side, the streetcar operates another, or, as I mentioned, temporal separation. And that's where an agreement where the freight service would operate when the streetcar service is in operation. So if the streetcar runs from 6 a.m. to midnight, that freight service could happen from midnight to 6 a.m. when the streetcar is out of operation. And that's just for safety reasons. The other vehicles, the excursion service and the DMU service, those are FRA compliant vehicles, so the freight and the commuter service could operate together. Again, the modern streetcar, we added, a total of 7 stations. You can see those listed there. And once it gets down into Bricktown, it could connect into the existing streetcar service that's currently being planned. And this would be a daily service, Monday through Sunday, same service hours as the streetcar system downtown. Now talk to about the connections into the intermodal hub. Option A is actually providing that connection, south into the hub. This would require construction a new elevated structure to provide that direct connection. It would be an elevated track and platform that would turn south off the line and connect into the hub. And this would it is the most conducive and friendly for the commuter service. But it does require extensive coordination with the BNSF to coordinate, their freight movements and the commuter service movements on there. Option B, as many of you know, there is a remnants of a bridge that kind of goes north to the BNSF line. To rehabilitate that, run the trains north and then back into the station is our option B. And again, you need to be extensive coordination with the BNSF to accomplish this service. Option C would be just to terminate at Bricktown, or around Russell and Perry. It would require a couple block walk to the intermodal hub, or block and a half walk if you wanted to connect to the streetcar to take you to the final destination. But this is kind of an option that could be done, a low cost option, I guess you could say. Is if you don't want to directly connect to the hub initially. This just kind of lists some of the summary table of the concepts I just discussed. As you can see, the extended and the upgrade excursion have 3 stations, commuter rail 5 and 7 stations. Your service varies. The excursion service would be Thursday through Sundays or special events. Commuter rail would be usually during your peak commute hours with 30-minute headways. Modern streetcar would be all-day service, usually we looked at 30-minute headways for that service. Some of the key differences when regards to track improvements, upgrade excursion and commuter rail, you need new track in segments 1 and 3. And if you wanted to possibly operate more than one train set, you need to look at passing tracks and some significant improvements within segment 2. And primarily that's to increase the speed, to get that operation over 10 or 20 miles per hour. The modern streetcar would require all new track in all 3 segments. Streetcar requires what they call continuously welded track, so all the track is connected. And the extended excursion concept, we'd look at new track in segment 3 and some minimal track improvements in segments 1 and 2 for safe operation, increased speed. Operations, the updated excursion, commuter rail, and modern streetcar with these improvements would be able to operate up to 45 miles per hour. The extended excursion, as we present today, would be limited to 10 to 20 miles per hour with these minimal improvements. And again, as I mentioned, the modern streetcar would be able to provide that last mile connection to the Adventure District. With the other two technologies, you'd either have to look at some sort of a shuttle service to provide patrons that last mile connection. Or there's also the walkability aspect of it. Now, the intermodal hub connection, options A and B would require construction of that new structure that would connect, go south and connecting to the hub. And both options A and B would require that significant coordination with the BNSF to where they'd have to shift some of their service to another track to provide that connection to the hub. Option A would require some coordination with the plans for the parking structure within in the Bricktown area. And note that with option B, and that's where they were actually backing into the hub, that requires about a 10-minute brake inspection each time the train has to reverse directions. So what would happen is the conductor or the engineer would stop the train, set the brakes, walk out, check all his hoses, and make sure everything looks good, get into the other side of the vehicle, repressurize the brakes, and be able to move forward. This could be about a 10-minute time period for that inspection, so that really could hamper your travel time from the Adventure District down to the intermodal hub. Maintenance facility, with the extended and upgrade excursion, they'd utilize the existing maintenance facility at the Rail Museum. The commuter rail concept will require a new maintenance facility, and the modern streetcar concept could be accommodated within the streetcar maintenance facility that's being planned with the initial streetcar system. It may require some expansion, but it could be accommodated into the existing maintenance facility. System upgrades, the excursion, commuter rail, modern streetcar would all need full upgrades of grade crossing, train control, and communication equipment. The extended excursion concept would just need upgrades at the train crossing. They could still use the communication via radio. And again, the modern streetcar, if you chose just a traditional streetcar, would need the electrification on the entire length. That would be the catenary system to provide the power for the streetcar. And again, you could utilize a wireless operation, whether if that technology becomes available or is chosen by the city to pursue. Now, just some cost estimates. The extended excursion option terminating within Bricktown is about $10 to $16 million, with total capital costs between $10 and $17 million. The upgrade excursion, and that would be either the option A connection that's directly into the hub, or the B where we reverse into the hub, would be between $46 and $66 million for that. Commuter rail option would be $85 to $100 million, and modern streetcar would be $95 to $105 million to implement that service, just the capital cost. And again, all these capital costs are planning estimates. They're very rough order of magnitude costs. So if one of these options is pursued, more detail will be looked into these cost estimates. Operating cost estimates, extended excursion can be $1 to $2 million per year. Upgrade excursion, same, $1 to $2 million. Commuter rail, $3 to $4 million, and modern streetcar, $2 to $3 million. And that's again the operation maintenance. And all the dollars we're presenting is current day 2013 dollars. So just kind of some recommendations to move forward. The agreement with the agreement with FRA would be needed to operate on the shared track with freight operations in segment 2. Currently, the contract COPTA has with the UP is up for renewal, so some negotiations could take place to help maybe have some passenger service on those on the segment 2 and potentially segment 3. And again, extensive coordination would be needed with BNSF, Amtrak, if the options A or B into the intermodal hub are considered. Some recommendations on implementation. We do recommend that they start with the extended excursion alternative. That requires just minimal track and guideway upgrades primarily for safety reasons. And negotiate with the UP, with the contractor, for some shared operation for that segment. And upgrade track in segment 3 to provide that, at least the Bricktown terminus, not necessarily that connection to the hub, but at least service into the Bricktown area. And upgrade all the grade crossings to gates and flashers. In potential, future phase implementation, again, all these recommendations could be phased. They don't have to be all done at once. Upgrade tracks, train control, communication, increase the frequency of service, consider changes to land use and transit-oriented development opportunities to help promote those activities at the proposed stations. And again, conduct a more detailed analysis of ridership projections to evaluate, the potential cost effectiveness for commuter rail and streetcar within the corridor. And convert operation to commuter rail or streetcar with the extension to the intermodal hub. And again, the commuter rail could connect elevated to the hub. The streetcar option would be an at-grade connection to the hub via EK Gaylord on the front of the hub. That's all we have, and be happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Nathaniel, I wanted to give you the chance as the chairman of that subcommittee to make any comments that you have, but I'd like for you, if you would, to take a moment to put in context what we're hearing here, considering that many of us haven't been to those subcommittee meetings, and knowing that this is not part of what you're currently considering as a proposed route.
Right.
So this is not part of what you're considering as the route. So help the rest of us understand.
Okay.
What we're doing here.
So the part of the money from MAPS for streetcar, it contemplates the downtown streetcar. It contemplates a intermodal hub, but also connections for other rail connectivity. And so while there's no MAPS money for the ADL specifically, perhaps there's, as part of that intermodal hub acquisition and refurbishing, you make sure that you're making connectivity for what we're considering here. And, if there is any other funds that the city wants to kind of couple up with the MAPS money, then you could do that segment 3, for example. And so since it's very important that streetcar and all transportation works together, then we want to make sure that we are using our time wisely to say, here's how that would work. We can't spend our money on that, but since we are tasked with making sure that it all works together, we kind of volunteered Jacob's time to look into this and to be able to propose to City Council and say, this is what you could do with follow-up funds to integrate with the transportation system.
Zane, anything you wanted to add as the vice chair of the committee?
Yes, thank you. I'll admit that I was in the minority yesterday, but in my view, it's a very good report, and we have it now, and we can use it in the future. But I don't see that it really has any bearing on what we're going to do with the downtown MAPS 3 streetcar program. It doesn't fit into the master plan, nor do we have anything in the budget to accommodate this. And while the report can be used in the future, it doesn't address some of the key issues that the Union Pacific and BNSF required to negotiate with them for the use of the track. And I personally don't see any reason to continue with this effort and would recommend that we stop here with this report.
Other committee members have a question?
Well, I do know that there had been some discussion about connecting the Adventure District with Bricktown, and the trails, the rail was the one means of doing that. If it is table, or if it is go no further than this, does that mean there will not be further discussion on this matter?
No, I don't believe that that's the case at all. I think it's in the greater light rail and rail expansion portion studies of the city, but from my point of view. We're using MAPS 3 streetcar funds to do this study, and if we go beyond this, we're taking money right out of our current streetcar downtown circulator, and that's what I'm really against. It doesn't mean that the plan or the future line connecting isn't possible. It's just that I don't think we need to expend our funds to do that.
And there's no further action for us, what Zane's saying, so we approved yesterday to move this on to the city council so that way they can make these policy choices going forward. But yeah, to clarify, there's no further action for the streetcar subcommittee as a body to, as far as this report is concerned.
So what you're asking us for is to approve a resolution approving this feasibility study to move forward to the city council.
Right, and there was kind of an addendum to that motion yesterday. Our committee members did have an interest in ensuring that there was kind of an addendum to the report to delve deeper into that Union Pacific Bricktown issue. But with that being the case, go ahead and move it up the chain to city council.
Okay. Did you have something you wanted to add, David?
I just want to make sure that addendum issue was mentioned, and I think we covered that. So.
If there are no other members of the, I'm sorry, I'm going to invite Marion Hutchison. He has asked to be heard on this issue, and it seems to be more appropriate to hear it now than to wait till the end for comments while this is the subject matter. Marion, welcome.
Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Marion Hutchison. I've been involved in a lot of these rail issues, and I do like the term I heard earlier about 30,000 feet, because that's where I tend to look at all of these issues. And I've served on the Intermodal Hub Study Oversight Committee, and I'm currently on the ACOG, RTD, Regional Transit Dialogue, and Commuter Corridor Analysis, which is a $1.25 million study looking at making connections throughout the metro from Midwest City, Tinker, Norm, and Edmond. I think I've had a chance to look through that whole study, and what I wanted to offer was, in addition to what Mr. Harding said, some of the background here so that it does help inform everyone. And Councilmember White can certainly add here, but back when MAPS 3 began and consideration was given for the transit component, $120 million was directly allocated toward the modern streetcar. But through Councilmember White and Councilmember Bowman, $10 million was set aside specifically for acquisition of properties for an intermodal hub, and the language in the resolution says and/or other commuter rail infrastructure as necessary. And the purpose of that was to prepare the hub, not just for the streetcar, but for all these other efforts that are underway to make sure that the connectivity was there. And the idea being that if we're able to acquire the properties for the hub at less than $10 million, it's possible that that remaining money could be used for some other critical connectivity assets, and that is actually set aside in MAPS and in the resolution. More specifically, just so everybody's real clear, that North Bricktown spur or corridor between the Santa Fe line to the Harder Yard of UP, which is referred to as Segment 3, is really a very critical section, not only for future operation of the Adventure line, but also the Midwest City Tinker line. It's recommended in the hub study as that's the main corridor. That property for 30 years, last 30 years, was owned by ODOT in the state. And it was under a lease agreement, long-term lease agreement with Union Pacific, and it just transferred property ownership last year. And there was meetings held at council level, city manager. There was a meeting held between them also and Union Pacific officials to discuss, is it possible to secure that? Because that piece is what would enable you to operate the Adventure line, to bring in trains in the future. And this study actually originated more out of a need to be able to inform council and Union Pacific and the city if we decide, if we have leftover money from that $10 million. Can we go negotiate with UP? Can we purchase it? Is it necessary? Is it critical? And so this study does give you a lot. I think you've got a benefit of beyond answering that question. You also have got a great study that informs the future process, the future transit needs. But in the short term, it does answer some real critical questions about how you need to connect in to the hub, and I do believe those are MAPS 3 questions, and MAPS 3 funding could be applied to that. So I just wanted to add that. I think that's an important point for the committee to know as they send that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. Anything you want to add? All right, are there other comments or questions? Nathaniel, does anyone have a motion they'd like to make?
I'll move to accept the recommendation with the amendment offered by the subcommittee. To further investigate the U-Pacific tie-in in Bricktown. Amanda, do you want to?
Sure. The appropriate way to handle it would be to do a motion to amend this item to include acceptance of the report with a future addendum to be received.
Okay. And that's what I will move to do.
Okay. And Gloria, are you going to second that? All right.
So now there's a vote on the amendment, and then you'll vote on the item.
Right. Then we have a motion to amend what we have before us. Is there further discussion?
Are we asking Jacobs to do some more work? What are we asking?
Yes. Yes, they're going to do some more work on the stuff that Nathaniel mentioned about Union Pacific, and they'll bring that back later. But we want to send this report on.
And I was going to clarify that information that will futurely be received from Jacobs will then conclude that study, correct?
I think it's appropriate that it go forward to council this way. I mean, because it sounds to me like this is a pure policy decision about what we do from here. You guys have done what this board and the subcommittee has done about what it can do without some further direction from the council. So I think it's appropriate that it do that.
All right. First we're voting on the amendment. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. We have amended it. Now, shall we approve the resolution as amended? Is there a motion? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the resolution as amended. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. The resolution is approved. That brings us to item 12. Is there any new business as defined by Amanda earlier in our meeting? Hearing none, let's move to item 13 quickly. Are there any subcommittee reports that have not had a chance to be considered? Michael, did you want to say anything about the senior wellness?
Well, I'll try to capture what's going on. As you all recall at our last advisory board meeting, this body approved a resolution to move forward with to City Council considering Oklahoma City County Health Department as the first partner for a senior wellness center. That resolution did go forward, and at the last City Council meeting, Jim Couch, City Manager Jim Couch, did a very good job of telling the council that how unusual the process has been thus far with the Senior Wellness Center project. And he explained that, as you all recall, there was a tie in the review committee. There was a tie in the subcommittee meeting before to move between two of the partners, and then subsequently voted to move forward with one. There was a tie on this very advisory board. A second motion was made and moved forward with one. Having said all that, it was pretty clear that there was a lot going on within this project, and so at the council meeting, it was agreed that the council would defer any recommendations or actions for 30 days, which means till this coming Tuesday on the 30th. And in the meantime, the council would have the opportunity to hear from the proposers in several meetings, and most of those meetings have occurred. Most council members have heard, at least from most of the partners who would like to be partners, and so that's report. We don't know what's going to happen Tuesday, but that's what's going to be on the agenda, I understand, is a consideration. Is that correct, Councilman White?
All right, thank you, Mike. Anyone else? I'm going to leave it to David to tell us whatever he'd like to about the committees that did meet. For example, the Convention Center Committee that did not meet this month, and I think the fair, and you can include that, whatever comments you want in that. So with that, we'll move to item 14, the informational items, and there are several.
Yes, sir. There are report here. I think Danny will pull that up on the West River connection. As I spoke a while ago about the right-of-way acquisitions, you can see the progress that's being made on that. The orangish color is property that's under contract. Blue is property that's acquired, and the turquoise is property that we're still negotiating with, and the red is property that's in condemnation. This is the piece from Meridian to Council. Danny, you want to go to the next one? And this is the other part, the part that Garver did the presentation on. The previous one was the triad one. You can see that we're a little further along on the right-of-way acquisition here, so we hope that we'll be able to send those plans out soon. Danny, you want to move on to the park? And then also with the park, we have substantial amount of property acquired. The dark blue is property that we've acquired. The light blue is actually property that's titled with ODOT, and it's part of a land swap deal, so we'll soon be changing title on that. The main property we have is the former off-ramp from I-40, the goldish brown up there that we're still working on some title issues, so we're getting very close to having all the property acquired within the park. And I want to move on to item D, which was an item for mowing and weed control within the park area that we just talked about. This was, it went through all the process through the subcommittee, through the advisory board, and through council as an item that was to be advertised and bid upon. We received low bid. We went ahead and sent that on to council because of the timing. We needed to get the park mowed. So we're sending that back to you, showing you that we went ahead and had council award that item. Then also items E and F, you can see that there's some real estate dealings. Closing on E is tentatively scheduled for 7/26, and closing on item F is to be determined. Item G is a little different than what you're used to seeing. This is a piece of the river Phase 2 improvements. It is the floating docks that's used at the river, or that will be used at the river as part of the racing course. We needed to move this up in order that the Boathouse Foundation can use it in October. The rest of our project won't start until closer to November or so. This will go out as a procurement item instead of a construction item. It's still bid, it'll still be the low bidder that will take it, but it's a different process through the city. You will see it when we get the low bidder, when we have the person who will do that. It will come through the subcommittee, and then through this advisory board, and then on to council. So you will see that, but we sent it on as a procurement item. So that's all I have.
Great. Any questions about any of those informational items by members of the board? All right, then let's move. David, do you have anything to add under item 15?
Real briefly, I can give you a summary on subcommittee activities. As most of you probably know, the racecourse lighting is complete, and there was a ceremony, and it's turned out really well. The windscreen project is still in design. Whitewater facility is in design, and Phase 2 improvements, as I just spoke of, are also in design. With senior wellness, Mr. Dover talked about the process that continues with that RFP for the operating partner. Trails and sidewalks, we just approved those two plans for Phase 1 of the trails. And then Phase 1 sidewalks, we have Project 1 under construction. We received bids of Project 2 on Tuesday, so we're well underway on sidewalks with that. Also, Phase 2 sidewalks are in design. Convention Center, the conceptual design continues on that. The consultant is working hard on making sure that things work out with the site and with budget, so we hope that in the coming weeks we'll be able to bring you something on that. Fairgrounds, Phase 1 grading is complete. Phase 1 parking improvements are under construction, and the Expo Center design continues. The subcommittee saw an update on the Expo design this month. Streetcar, the analysis on the alignment continues. Completed the Adventure District line report today, and then a public meeting was held on July 15th. We had about 150 people in attendance at that meeting. On the park, as we've talked a lot about the park, you can see that the design of that master plan continues, and we've been very busy.
You have. Any questions for David?
I just
Okay.
want to add,
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
I want to add real quick that we did do kind of a straw poll in our subcommittee yesterday, and we have a preference for the Zeta route, so check that out, with a couple of potential tweaks we want to investigate. I want to put that out there.
Great.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
when we were discussing the downtown park and also the Franklin, the Film Exchange building, there was a mention of parking and that the lack of parking would be a problem for utilization of that building as well. And I had not heard in the, or did I see, how we're going to address parking in that entire area. Is there a parking plan?
If I may answer your question, Gloria, if you do look at the study, it shows that there will be immediate parking around the park on Hudson and Robinson. It will be a combination of parallel parking, all metered parking along those areas, but every piece of roadway that can be used for that will address parking for hopefully a total of 864 stalls around the park. But I think what the item there was that a building of that size could bring 300, 400, 500 people for one single event. And then looking at the overall parking for use of the park plus that single event could be a detriment to that property.
Any other comments? I want to then offer the opportunity to any citizens who are here that may want to make a comment. Hearing none, I want to close the meeting with this, if we may then. I just want to compliment all of you. You're all serving on subcommittees. We haven't always had a quorum, but we've been doing this for a long time. We've had quorums most of the time. We have a lot of public interest in this. You're all volunteering and dedicating your time, and I want to thank you. I don't want you to worry about that we don't agree on everything. I've been married 54 years. My wife and I don't agree on everything. And we're still together. And we're all still together here. Independent thinking is not to be discouraged. So I think it's a good thing that we continue to work well together, and I commend you for a great job you've done. Anything else to come before us? We're adjourned.
Good meeting.
Thank you, Pete. I'm sorry it went so long.